My husband abandoned me the day after our wedding to go on our honeymoon to Bali with his mom, but when his family stormed my parents' house demanding I come back, I fought back with a threat that left them speechless, and they never saw coming. I'm 26 years old, I work in digital marketing, and I still can't believe that my marriage lasted exactly 2 weeks before everything exploded in the most dramatic way possible. The thing is, I was always the typical good girl, the eldest daughter who does everything right, who doesn't cause problems, who always says yes so as not to disappoint anyone. I guess that was exactly what got me into this mess, because when I met Zachary like 3 years ago, he seemed perfect, or at least that's what I thought at the time. I met him at a work conference, one of those boring ones where nobody wants to be but we all have to go because the boss says so. Zachary was 27 then, worked in finance, was handsome, polite, and seemed to have his life completely organized. We started talking during the coffee break. Super cliche. And I don't know, there was something about him that made me feel comfortable. We exchanged numbers and started dating. The first few months were amazing. Honestly, we did things together. Went to restaurants, to the movies, weekend hikes, all super normal and nice. But looking back, I should have noticed it earlier. The signs were there from the beginning. I was just too in love or too blind to see them. The first time I met his family was like 4 months into dating. We went to dinner at his parents' house, and as soon as I walked through the door, I felt this weird atmosphere, like everyone was evaluating me, measuring every word I said. His mother, Evelyn, was a woman in her mid-50s who had this way of smiling that didn't reach her eyes. You know what I mean? It was like she was being nice, but at the same time making it clear that I was in her territory. During dinner, she asked like 1,000 questions about my family, my work, my future plans, and every time I answered something, she made this little gesture with her head. Like subtle disapproval, but noticeable enough to make me uncomfortable. Zachary said nothing, just ate, calmly as if everything was normal. After that dinner, I met the rest of the clan, because yes, it was a complete clan. There was Maria, Zachary's aunt, who was basically like Evelyn but a more aggressive version without filter, and then there were cousins, uncles, a whole network of people who got together every weekend like they were some kind of family cult. At first, I tried to fit in, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're serious with someone, right? I went to all the family gatherings, helped in the kitchen, listened to their stories, nodded when they said things I didn't agree with, basically became the compliant version of myself, because I thought that's how I'd win their approval. So, after almost 2 years together, Zachary proposed to me. It was at a fancy restaurant, with the ring and the whole show, and I said yes because I loved him, or thought I loved him. I'm not sure anymore which was which at that point. My parents, Peter and Joyce, were happy for me, but I remember my mom asked me if I was sure, if I really knew Zachary and his family well. I told her yes, that everything was fine, that she worried too much. I wish I had listened to that warning voice in her tone. The wedding planning was an absolute nightmare, but I didn't realize it until it was too late. Evelyn practically took over everything, decided the venue, the colors, the menu, the guest list, and every time I tried to give my opinion, she'd say things like, "Oh, honey, trust me. I know what's best," or "Don't worry about those details, leave it to me." Zachary never defended me. He just said his mom had good taste and that it was easier to let her do what she wanted to avoid conflicts. I gave in on everything, literally everything, to the point where my own wedding felt like someone else's event. The wedding day came and it was beautiful on paper. Everything looked perfect in the photos. The venue was spectacular. My dress was pretty, although it wasn't the one I had originally chosen. But during the entire ceremony, I had this knot in my stomach that I couldn't explain. My friends were there. My best friend Tiffany was crying with emotion. My parents looked proud but also a bit worried, and Zachary's family literally dominated 80% of the guests. When we said "I do" and kissed, I remember thinking, well, that's it. Now everything's going to get better. Now that we're married, his family is going to accept me completely. How wrong I was. Like, I don't have words to describe how wrong I was. After the reception, which ended late because Zachary's family didn't want to leave, we got to the apartment we had rented together a few months ago. We were tired. I was dying to take off my shoes and collapse on the couch, but I was also excited because the next day we were leaving for Bali for our honeymoon. We had planned that trip for months. 2 weeks in Bali, incredible hotels, beaches, temples, everything I had always dreamed of. I had my bags, practically packed, only some last-minute details were missing. Then Zachary told me we needed to talk. We sat in the living room, and he had this weird expression on his face, like nervous but also kind of resigned, and I thought maybe he was tired or stressed from the wedding. He said, "I need to tell you something about the trip," and I was like, "Oh, okay, did the flights change or something?" He took a deep breath and dropped the bomb. His family had decided that they were going to Bali instead of us, that they had paid for everything and technically it was their money so they could do what they wanted, and that I had to stay home to clean up after the wedding and organize all the gifts we had received. I went blank. I literally didn't process what I had just heard for like 10 full seconds. Then I said, "Wait, what? Are you kidding?" And he said, "No, I'm not kidding. My family is going to Bali and you're staying here. Plus, there's a lot to do in the house, and my mom says it's important that you start establishing your role as a wife." In that moment, something inside me broke. Or rather, woke up. I don't know how to explain it. It was like all those months, those years of saying yes to everything, of swallowing my opinions, of trying to please his family, finally reached a breaking point. I asked him if he was serious. If he really expected me, his wife of literally 4 hours, to stay home doing housework while he went on vacation to Bali with his mom. He got defensive. Started saying that I didn't understand the importance of family, that his parents had done a lot for us, that it was a small sacrifice. A small sacrifice. Those were his exact words. I couldn't believe it. I mean, can you believe it? I had just married this man, and an hour later he was telling me that our honeymoon was a small sacrifice. I didn't argue that night. I just nodded, went to the bedroom, and lay down on the bed still wearing my wedding dress. I cried myself to sleep, and when I woke up, the next morning, Zachary was already gone. He left a note in the kitchen saying the flight was leaving early, that his family was already at the airport, and that he hoped I would have everything clean by the time he returned in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He left me alone for 2 weeks after we got married. I stood there in the kitchen, reading that note over and over, and something inside me just said no. I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to start my marriage being his family's servant. I grabbed my laptop, got on the internet, and looked for the nearest flight to anywhere that wasn't there. I found a flight to Maui, leaving in 3 hours, and I bought it without thinking twice. My parents have a vacation home in Hawaii, a small but beautiful place where we had spent many summers when I was a kid, and I knew it was available because nobody was using it at that time. I packed my suitcase in literally 15 minutes, grabbed my passport, left the apartment exactly as it was with half the wedding gifts unopened and the dishes from the day before in the dishwasher, and went to the airport. During the entire trip, I was shaking. I don't know if from fear or adrenaline or rage, probably a mixture of all three. I turned off my phone as soon as I boarded the plane because I knew that if I left it on, I would start doubting my decision. I would start feeling guilty, and I couldn't allow myself that at that moment. I arrived in Maui around 6 in the evening, took a taxi to my parents' house, and as soon as I got in and closed the door behind me, I collapsed on the floor and cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for my marriage that had barely lasted a day before becoming a nightmare. I cried for allowing myself to be so submissive for so long. I cried for all the signs I ignored because I wanted to believe that love was enough. After crying for like an hour, I got up, took a long shower, and decided that I was going to use those 2 weeks to think about what the hell I was going to do with my life. The next few days in Hawaii were weird, like surreal. I woke up without having to answer to anyone, without having to cook for anyone but myself, without having to worry about pleasing someone else's family. I went to the beach every day. Sometimes I just sat there looking at the ocean for hours. Other times I tried surfing. It was terrible, but it didn't matter because nobody was judging me. I bought food at local restaurants. I read books I had wanted to read for years but never had time for. It was liberating and terrifying at the same time, because for the first time in a long time, I was completely alone with my thoughts, without distractions, without excuses. I kept my phone off during the entire first week. I knew that eventually I would have to face reality, but I needed that time for myself, to understand what I really wanted. In the second week, I started writing in a journal, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. And I wrote everything, absolutely everything that had happened in my relationship with Zachary, all the times his family had made me feel small, all the moments where he hadn't defended me, all the red flags I ignored. because I thought it was my duty as a partner to be understanding and flexible. On the last day of my stay in Hawaii, I decided to turn on my phone. Big mistake? Or maybe not, I don't know. I had literally hundreds of messages, missed calls, voicemails, all from Zachary and his family. The first messages were confused. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Then they became fake concern. We're worried about you, call us. And finally, they escalated to pure rage and accusations. Zachary was telling me I was irresponsible, that I had embarrassed him in front of his family, that how dare I disappear like that. Evelyn sent me a message saying I was selfish and didn't deserve her son. Maria, the aunt, was even worse. She called me everything, attacked my parents, saying they had raised me without values and without respect for family. It was an absolute mess. The interesting thing is that none of them, not a single one, wondered why I had left, what had happened for me to make that decision. It was all about how I had offended them, how I had been disrespectful, how I needed to apologize immediately, and that's when I had total clarity, like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. These people were never going to see me as a person with my own feelings and needs. I was always going to be just an accessory in Zachary's life, an unpaid domestic employee who should be grateful for the privilege of being part of their family. I returned home, well, to the city where I lived, because that apartment no longer felt like my home, and the first thing I did was call Tiffany, my best friend. I told her everything that had happened, from the honeymoon thing to my escape to Hawaii, and she, without hesitating for a second, told me to move in with her temporarily. Her apartment was small but cozy, and more importantly, it was a space where I could breathe and think without the constant pressure of Zachary and his family. I moved in with Tiffany that same night. I just grabbed my clothes and some personal things from the apartment. Zachary wasn't there. I think he was still in Bali, or had already returned but was at his parents' house. I don't know. I left a note saying I was okay, that I needed space, and that we would talk soon. I knew that wasn't going to be enough for them, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. The next day, like at 7 in the morning, I get a call from my mom, Joyce, and she's super upset, almost unable to speak properly. I ask her what happened, and she tells me that Zachary's family had gone to their house, that they literally showed up at the door demanding to know where I was, that they caused a scene in the neighborhood, that Evelyn was screaming in the front yard accusing me of being a bad wife and saying that my parents had turned me into a selfish person without values. The neighbors came out to see what was happening. It was humiliating for my parents who have never hurt anyone and just wanted their daughter to be happy. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. They could mess with me all they wanted, but attacking my parents, embarrassing them in their own neighborhood, that was crossing a line that had no turning back. I called Zachary, and for the first time in our relationship, I told him exactly what I thought without filters and without worrying about his feelings. I told him that his family was completely out of control, that what they had done at my parents' house was unacceptable, that he was a coward for never defending me, and that if anyone had to apologize here, it was them to me, not me to them. He tried to play the victim, saying that I had abandoned him on our honeymoon. Technically, it wasn't our honeymoon. It was his honeymoon with his mom. But whatever. And that his family, it was just worried. I told him I was fed up with his excuses and hung up on him. After that call, I made the hardest but most necessary decision of my life. I called my parents and told them I was going to move in with them for a while, that I needed their support to get out of this marriage. My dad, Peter, who is normally super calm and diplomatic, told me without hesitation to do whatever I needed to do to be happy, that they supported me completely. That same afternoon, I started looking for divorce lawyers, which is crazy, considering I had been married for literally 2 weeks, but there was no turning back at that point. A few days later, something happened that finished confirming that making the decision to divorce was the right thing. I was at a cafe near Tiffany's apartment when a woman approached me. She was about my age, 28 maybe, and she asked me if I was Victoria, Zachary's wife. I said yes, although technically I no longer felt like his wife, and she told me her name was Pam and that she had been Zachary's girlfriend like 4 years ago. At first I got defensive, like, what does this woman want? But she quickly explained that she wasn't there to cause problems, that she just wanted to warn me about something. We sat down and Pam told me her story, and it was chilling how similar it was to mine. Basically, when she and Zachary were dating, his family did exactly the same thing. They tried to control every aspect of her life, Evelyn treated Pam like she was her personal employee, and Zachary never defended her. Pam told me she had lasted 3 years in that relationship before having the courage to end it, and that to this day she regretted not doing it sooner. She told me she had seen our wedding announcement on social media and had wanted to contact me before but didn't know how to do it without seeming crazy or invasive. When she found out through mutual friends about what had happened with the honeymoon and all the drama, she decided she had to talk. To me, talking to Pam was revealing because I realized this wasn't something personal against me. It was simply how this family operated. They looked for women who were compliant and submissive, and when someone dared to have their own opinion or establish boundaries, they attacked them until they broke them or until they left. Pam told me that the best decision she had made in her life was to walk away from Zachary and his family, and she encouraged me to do the same before it was too late. The next day, I hired a lawyer, Robert Bennett, a man in his 50s with a lot of experience in complicated divorces. I told him the whole situation, and he assured me I had a solid case, especially considering that Zachary had basically abandoned me the day after the wedding to go on a trip with his family. Robert prepared all the papers and I signed them without hesitation. When we sent them to Zachary, I thought maybe he would react, that maybe he would realize how serious the situation was and finally take my side against his family. But no. What he did was send me a message saying I was being dramatic and just wanted attention. About 2 more weeks passed, and I was already living with my parents in their house, working from there because fortunately my job was remote. One night Tiffany called me to invite me to her birthday party, something small with close friends at a local bar. I told her I wasn't in the mood, but she insisted, said it would be good for me to go out and distract myself a bit. I decided to go, got dressed up a little, put on a casual dress, and went to the bar where the party was. Everything was going well. I was talking to Tiffany and other friends, having a drink, trying to forget for a few hours about the disaster that was my life, when suddenly Zachary showed up. I don't know how he found out I was there. Probably some mutual friend told him. But he entered the bar like a storm, furious, looking for me. When he saw me, he approached yelling about how I dared to go out to parties when we were in the middle of a marriage crisis, that it was obvious I was cheating on him, that I had probably been with someone else the entire time in Hawaii. His accusations were so ridiculous that I almost wanted to laugh, but the situation was too serious. The whole bar went silent watching the scene. Tiffany tried to calm him down, but he pushed her. Not hard, but still pushed her. And one of the friends who was there, Carlos, a friend of Tiffany's that I barely knew, stepped in to defend Tiffany. Zachary immediately accused him of being my lover, of being the reason I was leaving him, and before anyone could react, he tried to hit him. Carlos dodged him, and the bar manager was already calling security to get Zachary out of the place. It was humiliating, horrible, dramatic, like a scene from a bad soap opera but in real life. After they kicked Zachary out of the bar, I was shaking, basically in shock. Tiffany took me to her apartment and there I had a moment of clarity. I took out my phone and called Evelyn, his mother. When she answered with that condescending tone she always used with me, I told her very clearly that since Zachary wasn't signing the divorce papers voluntarily, I was going to proceed to get a restraining order against him for harassment and threats, and that was going to appear on his record, which would completely ruin his career in finance where he worked with high-profile clients who valued impeccable reputation. I told her she had 24 hours to make her son sign those papers, or I would proceed with the restraining order and also make public all the things her family had said and done to me, including the scene at my parents' house. Evelyn was silent for a long moment, and then with a completely different voice, without that fake sweetness she always used, she told me that Zachary would sign the papers. I hung up and started crying again, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was also relief, liberation, knowing that I had finally set a clear boundary and maintained it regardless of the consequences. The next day, like at 10 in the morning, Robert called me to tell me that they had received the divorce papers signed by Zachary. It was fast, without additional drama, without more harassing messages. Evelyn kept her word because she knew I was serious. The legal process officially started. Robert explained to me that it would take a few months to complete, but that the hard part was already done. Zachary had signed, there was no turning back. Now, like 3 months after all this, I'm still living with my parents, but I'm looking for my own apartment. I went back to therapy, something I should have done years ago, and I'm working on understanding why I allowed myself to be so compliant for so long, why I ignored all the warning signs, why I thought my value depended on how well I could make other people happy. It hasn't been easy. There are days where I still feel guilty, where I wonder if I exaggerated or if I should have tried harder. But then I remember everything that happened and I know I did the right thing. The divorce is still in process. Robert says it will probably be finalized in a couple more months. I haven't heard from Zachary or his family again. And honestly, I hope I never have contact with them again. My parents have been incredible. They support me completely and have never made me feel like a burden, even though I'm living with them at 26 years old. Tiffany is still my best friend and constantly reminds me that I made the right decision. Even Pam, Zachary's ex, sent me a message saying she was proud of me for getting out of there faster than she was able to. I guess in the end I learned that sometimes loving someone isn't enough. When that person isn't willing to put you above the toxic expectations of their family. I learned that saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you aware of your own worth. And I learned that it's okay to prioritize your own peace of mind and happiness, even if that means disappointing people you thought loved you. My marriage lasted 2 weeks, but the lesson it left me will last a lifetime.